Happy Independence Day, everyone. Now, it's not coincidence that I waited for this day to release this video. Now, I know a whole lot of you guys out there are probably thinking like, hey, I like the corny jokes and the family pictures, but what's with all this political stuff? Like, why are you obsessed with all this political stuff you put online? You got a beautiful wife, successful children, you got this brand new house basically in paradise, you have this burgeoning ministry. Why obsessed with all this political stuff? Well, that's precisely why. It's because I have a beautiful wife. It's because I have successful children. It's because I have a home in one of the greatest places on earth. And it's because I have a ministry that it is necessary for me to be involved in all this political stuff. You see, upon entering two different branches of the military, and when I became a police officer, and each time I was promoted, I took the same oath. And that oath reads, I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, both foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I'm about to enter, so help me God. I don't remember there being an expiration date on that oath, and in my life I've only taken 2 oaths. 3 if you count my oath when I prayed the sinner's prayer and gave my life to Jesus Christ. The other oath was to my wife, and in regards to those, I've been far from a perfect husband, I've been far from a perfect citizen, and I've definitely been far from a perfect Christian. But although it might be a concept from a bygone era, I take oaths very seriously and believe I will be held accountable for that which I swore to defend and follow on my last day, and I will not forsake any of those oaths. Right now, whether you want to acknowledge it or not, we are in the very midst of a civil war. Not a looming one, we are actually in the middle of a civil war where it's not only ideas, but actual violence has begun and cities are burning. Now, I know you like to be more comfortable and think these things I say are just crazy and outlandish, but I encourage you to go and look everything up for yourself. One of those things you need to look up is the Fabian Society. The Fabian Society was created in 1884 when a poet, a sexologist, and a socialist formed a secret society on how to convert the West to socialism. Now, they named their society after Quintus Fabius Maximus Verrucus, who was a Roman general. He's nicknamed the Delayer because he faced the far superior Hannibal of Carthage. And instead of facing Hannibal in open warfare, he adopted a strategy of slow attrition and wearing down the Carthaginian army. Now, the explanatory note of their founding charter is that for the right moment, you must wait, as Fabius did most patiently when warring against Hannibal, though many censored his delays, but when the time comes, you must strike hard, as Fabius did, or your waiting will be in vain and fruitless. You can see their images are the turtle and the wolf in sheep's clothing. You see, they've adopted the same strategy. The communists, unlike in the East, where they opted for open warfare, knew that in the West, we would not fold easily and we would not crumble militarily. So they took a 100-year strategy to slowly wear us down by infiltrating education, infiltrating the arts, and infiltrating the media, and weakening our resolve and changing our mentality. For years, they used euphemisms like progressivism and social justice, but they've grown impatient Now the Democrats are just flat out calling themselves Democrat Socialists. We have terrorist groups like Black Lives Matter and Antifa engaging in outright military open Bolshevik warfare against U.S. cities. And this warfare has cost billions of dollars in damage if these cities ever recover. And they've made the conditions for the people living in those cities far worse than ever before, so that they would become dependent upon the government and become dependent upon those very people who are fighting for the ideals which destroyed them. So what are we to do? Well, my philosophy is you treat them like vampires. Now, what do I mean by that? You have to be on guard. You have to know that they are a threat to our very lives. But they're also victims themselves. And if we can possibly cure them before we fight them and use force, the first option is we need to convert them with persuasion and with knowledge and with information and with love. Lincoln nailed it. He basically said the easiest and most effective way to eliminate an enemy is by converting them and making them your friend. That's what I hope to do here. You see, spiritual freedom, which we get from the gospel, and physical freedom and prosperity, which we get from the American way of life, are absolutely beautiful gifts. And I know sometimes I use it like a bludgeon, a cudgel, and try to hit people over the head with it. The reality is we have to present these beautiful gifts to the other side as gifts and make them understand why it's so important for us to defend the United States. During World War II, the U.S. government commissioned Frank Capra to make a series of inspirational documentaries entitled Why We Fight. The idea was to give the Americans resolve by reminding them why it was so crucial that we defend this land of liberty and that we defeat the National Socialists from Europe. That's what I hope to achieve with this page. I want to remind you of why America is the greatest nation the earth has ever seen and why it is important that we be willing to sacrifice our blood, our fortunes, and our sacred honor to defend it. In a series of videos, I'm also going to give you the tools to help you communicate with the other side, so hopefully we can convert them. In the first video coming after this, I actually explain the reason it's so difficult to communicate with the other side is we speak different languages. We literally define terms with completely and opposing definitions, so you can never make headway. So for us to be able to communicate with the other side, we need to understand how they think and how they define words. It's even worse than that. In the second video, I will talk about how we have very different concepts of truth itself. Conservatives adhere to a correspondence theory, whereas the left adheres to a coherence theory of truth. So I'll get to that when we get to the video. And I'll also do part 2 of my Who You Should Believe. I'm equipping you guys with these tools because, quite frankly, I cannot do it alone. And I know I'm not alone because there are so many of you that tell me in person or they private message me how much they love my posts and they send me secret messages in support, yet they are afraid to post any of that publicly. I understand why. You're afraid of cancel culture. You're afraid of the left coming after you, harming your family, harming you at your work. But you have to stand up and announce where you stand. The founders met in secret at first. This is true. But eventually they all stood up and signed that Declaration of Independence and challenged a king. The last line of that declaration reads, and I just referred to it a minute ago, and for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. And as Franklin pointed out after he signed it himself, we must all hang together, or most assuredly, we will all hang separately. For those founders, free speech was absolutely vital to everything we believe as Americans. But that is not a value shared by the left. You see, conservatives believe in the truth, and that because they're Christians, the truth will set you free. So in an open discussion and debate, we know that the truth will prevail. The prevailing philosophy on the left comes from a guy named Herbert Marcuse, who in 1965 wrote an essay called Repressive Toleration. He theorized in that, basically, that the Marxist goals are so important, and their concept of Marxism was liberation, even though Marxism killed about 200 million of its own citizens and is the most repressive system the earth has ever seen. But in their mind, they would get Marxism right for the first time. That they saw anything that opposed it as so repressive that they needed to shut down any speech that would stop them from achieving their goal. In his essay, he wrote, they would include the withdrawal of toleration of speech and assembly from groups and movements which promote aggressive policies, armament, chauvinism, discrimination on the grounds of race and religion, or which oppose the extension of public services, social security, medical care, etc. Moreover, the restoration of freedom of thought may necessitate new and rigid restrictions on teachings and practices in the educational institutions which by their very methods and concepts serve to enclose the mind with the established universe of discourse and behavior, thereby precluding a priori relation evaluation of the alternatives. It's a lot of words. Basically, he just says exactly what you see on social media, exactly what you see in the corporate world, exactly what you see in the universities. They think what they have to say is so important and so right that they shut down any opposition. If you have evidence that the entire U.S. economy was shut down for no reason, for a disease which has a 99.9% survivability rate, they shut you down. If you have information that shows that Black Lives Matter is actually a Marxist, communist, terrorist group, same goes for Antifa, they shut you down. When they have little power, they shut you down by calling you racist, or they block you from their page. If they have a little more power, if they have a business, they fire you. If you own the business, they boycott you. And if they become the predominant power in government, history has proven every single time they shut you down by arresting you and by executing you. It is because the mob has no respect for free speech. They have no respect for the First Amendment. That is exactly why the founders put in place the Second Amendment. We must all be ready. And in this second Civil War, it will not be like the first. The first really wasn't a civil war. It was a war between two countries that were previously one, where you had the North and you had the South, and it was armies engaging. This second Civil War will be an actual civil war, brother versus brother, neighbor versus neighbor. And it is absolutely horrible. It is something I want to avoid. So this right now is not a call to violence. This is a plea to avoid it. And the only way we can avoid it is if you make your voice heard now. You see, the left, the side that wants to provoke the Civil War, has no idea what they're in for. They have a monopoly over soy, Birkenstocks, rainbow flags, and shrill women. But they also have a monopoly over the press, the universities, the media, and social media. So they believe that they have the mass numbers. They have no concept of the silent majority. You see, the silent majority has the monopoly on guns, testosterone, military and police training, and frankly, we also do have the numbers. So you need to speak up. You need to have your voice heard so that this other side that is so agitating for war will wake up and realize what they are in store. You need to tell them to knock off their nonsense and knock it off now. When we see the flag and the red stripes would represent all the blood that was sacrificed on our behalf, we need to respect that. They gave us more freedom and prosperity than the world has ever seen. And we are obligated to give to our progeny at least that which was given to us. When idiots and ingrates threaten to destroy all of that, we must stand up and say, this I will defend. Now, Lincoln said it a lot better than me at Gettysburg, so we'll finish with his address. He said, the brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great tasks of remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause which we gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that the government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Happy Independence Day. God bless you all.